Hey guys, it's PetaPixel Podcast time. Are you excited?
Very excited.
Always.
Oh man, that was my friend Chris Niccolls, who's very excited. Jaron, are you excited?
Yeah.
All right. Jaron, the guy who said yeah, Jaron Schneider, my other friend, is also excited to start the PetaPixel Podcast. How's everybody?
Good. I'm going with a cyberpunk theme today in my background colors. Hopefully
I like it. Yeah.
Kind of works.
Very techie because we've got a very techie show today. We're going to get some details on the new JPEG XL format that got a lot of buzz because it was being used in the latest iPhone. And if you're going to roll out a format, that's a hell of a way to do it. Get it into a lot of people's hands. So we're going to talk about that with someone who's actually working on developing the file format. So you can all stay tuned for that. But before we kick this off, I always like to ask a question, let everybody know you all a little bit better. And the other night, we're scrolling around as one does, looking for a movie to watch, me and my wife. And it's like, I've heard Arrival's good. And I'm like, Arrival rules. Arrival's an amazing movie. And she hadn't seen it. So we watched that. And she's like, are they going to, halfway through the movie, she's like, are they going to show those aliens? And I'm like, yeah, they're going to show those aliens. She's like, is it a good alien design? I'm like, baby, this
Spoiler
is one of my
alert.
favorite alien designs ever in a movie. So I want to know, what are your favorite in television or films? What are your favorite aliens?
Favorite aliens?
Yeah, like favorite alien design.
I mean, you know, that green lady at the start of Star Trek was pretty awesome. You know, I liked the way she danced. Favorite alien? I mean, of course, you got the classic Geiger designed aliens, which are beautiful.
Yeah, I think Xenomorph's an easy cheat.
Yeah, Xenomorph is an easy one. I don't know, Jaron, what's your favorite aliens?
You guys will not know anything about this, but I kind
it's
of
going to
like...
be from anime.
No. I like the Lubrayans. They're a species that is all... Well, they're extinct now because we killed the last of them. Rolk, Disciple of the Witness in Destiny 2, is a Lubrayan. And,
it's a video game thing.
Video game,
okay.
yeah, pop culture.
Gotcha.
So I like those. I also like Halo Elites. I think those are cool.
They got the jaws that...
Yeah, they're more mandibles, I would think. But I really like Rolk's design. He's got like horse legs. So like he's got another knee that goes backwards. And he does utilize said horse leg to kick the crap out of you if you get close to him, which is great.
Right. Chris, what do you got?
Well, I like the Xenomorph.
Some obscure like B movie. I feel like that's kind of in your wheelhouse there.
I don't know. It's not coming to me. I don't watch a lot of alien movies. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
You could count the angels in Evangelion.
I don't like those. Yeah, this Shinji sucks.
I don't think anyone would disagree with you. Yeah, Shinji does suck.
You know what? I did really like, and I'm forgetting the name, but in Mass Effect, if we're going to talk video games, who are the bad guy aliens? The Sentinels?
The Reapers.
The Reapers, yeah. So I thought that whole, and I'm not going to wreck it for anybody who hasn't played it, but that whole concept of like why they do what they do, I thought that was really cool. Very sinister, very awesome, very well done. So,
but is that a design? Do you like their design?
Not really, you know, but just the concept of why they, you know, I don't want to wreck it for anybody. Play the game. If you haven't played the game, it's fantastic.
I haven't played the game.
That does link to there's a species in Mass Effect, and there's one that's very similar in Star Wars, where they don't have traditional mouths, and they kind of have like a mast shaped head, and they talk out of like the lungs on the side of their heads. They're quadrupedal in Mass Effect, but they're bipedal in Star Wars. And in Star Wars, these creatures can actually use the Force mixed with sound waves to do massive like force pushes, which is super neat. Those are cool. That's a cool design too. I can't remember what those are called, but I'm sure someone listening knows. But Jordan, you haven't said what your favorite alien design is.
I was going to say, I think the heptapods in Arrival are just so fascinating.
Yeah.
No faces, truly alien, which is exactly what I want to see. And yes, definitely the Xenomorph would be up there for the same reason. Just
remember, if humans die on this planet, it will be squids that take over. They're going to be the new intelligent life form. So
I thought it was going to be octopuses.
Well, the same, like cephalopods.
Well, they're not. Because they're definitely different.
No. They're related, right?
If anyone here
there's
likes
no
anime,
My Friend Squid on Netflix that wins
Go watch.
Oscars, but My Friend
Squid and
Octopus.
cuttlefish. The reason why it'll be squids and cuttlefish is because squids, they communicate with each other using their bodies and their coloration. I mean, that's language, okay? And then they've got limbs to manipulate things. Anyways, that's going to be the new.
Go watch Gargantia on the Verdurous Planet.
Oh, who recommended that?
You.
All right.
You
I want
recommended
to know I want to know from the viewers and the listeners, what do you think will replace us? Will it be the octopuses or will it be the squid cuttlefish?
Or whatever other creature you might want to suggest.
This was great. What a good intro.
Yeah. On an unrelated note, we're going to talk again, as Jordan said, about JPEG XL this week. We also have a bunch of other stuff that got announced this week, and we're going to cover that first. And then I made a promise that we were going to do a lot of tech support and a lot of speak pikes because I had a lot of them backed up, and we have tons of those to go through too. You might be breaking that
promise.
No, we're going to do it. All right, let's get started.
I'm going to have calamari for lunch.
Thanks again to our podcast sponsor, OM System. OM System ambassador and macro photographer Ben Salb has mastered the art of capturing the smallest details of insects and spiders, tiny creatures that often go unnoticed around us. Ben's passion for macro photography began as a hobby, where he experimented with macro photography techniques in his own backyard. What sets Ben apart as a macro photographer is his approach to capturing these delicate subjects, combined with the cutting edge features of his OM System gear. The built-in image stabilization allows him to photograph even the tiniest bugs without needing a tripod, while the focus stacking technology ensures that every part of the image is sharp and detailed. This kind of precision is what makes macro photography using OM System truly stand out, whether photographing at sunrise with insects, when insects are less active, or tracking more lively subjects later in the day. And as if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm currently playing a slideshow of some of his macro work. And it is, if you don't like bugs, I apologize. Look away, shield your eyes because there's a lot of them. But these are some
just listen this week.
Insanely good pictures.
Yeah.
As I continue, the technology inside OM System cameras like high-res shot mode and advanced focus bracketing allow photographers to capture macro subjects in vibrant detail. It's not just about getting the shot; it's about capturing that shot with perfection. You'll see the vibrant patterns in his images that Ben showcases macro subjects in nature that inspire us to look a little closer. Ben's work has earned him recognition in some of the most respected photography publications, and it's easy to see why. His images tell stories about creatures we often overlook, and through his lens, we can appreciate just how beautiful our world really is. If you're inspired to try macro photography or want to explore the potential of capturing images like Ben's, take a look at what OM System has to offer. Now through November 3rd, the OM1 Mark II is $1,999, $400 off the regular retail price, and the Zuiko Digital ED 90mm f3.5 Pro macro lens. Jordan, you going to show that? There it is. Yeah, next to Jordan's head, so you can get a.
It is smaller than my head. I can.
There's a lot of things smaller than yours.
That lens is only $1,199, which is $300 off.
Even smaller.
Off the regular retail price. Visit your local authorized OM System retailer or go to explore.omsystem.com/PetaPixel today. And to read more about Ben Salb and his macro photography, you can continue to watch this podcast as I continue to play pictures, or you can check the link below for the full story where we do a deep dive on him and his work. All right.
So many eyes.
Yeah. Give me your favorite photography. Which of these is your favorite? I'll go first. I like this wasp. I believe it's a wasp with like the water droplets on its eyes. It's just like the fact that the water is that small and it's like on even smaller compound eyes looks super sick to me. Or is that an ant?
I will say that Ben really does get quite an emotive response out of the spiders that he photographs. You know, some of them look kind of adorable. Some of them look scary. I like the mom with the babies all over her head.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of the spotted tiger beetle, it turns out it is, with like the bluey greeny transitions all over it. It looks super fake. It looks like it would be in the running for favorite alien types if we were still having that conversation.
Those are all aliens. Every one of those was an alien.
Spotted tiger. That is a cool. Okay, you know what? That is a good picture to choose. That's neat.
Yeah.
All right, there we go. Again, thanks to Ohm System for sponsoring the PetaPixel podcast. We're going to talk about another 90 millimeter.
Yeah,
Tamron.
holy hell! What a segue.
Yeah, it's an
right.
all 90 week.
Tamron announced a new 90 millimeter f2.8 macro lens for both Nikon Z and Sony E. This is the first time in my memory that Tamron announced a lens for both mirrorless mounts simultaneously. You usually have to wait.
They usually stagger it.
Yeah. But this is celebrating, I think it's like a long time since they made their first 90, and this is
it's always been
anniversary.
Legendary. The Tamron 90,
45 years.
A solid option
the 90
for my entire
is
life.
the same. Yeah, same age as me.
Really?
Yeah, 1979, classic. Classic one. I love the DI macro. Like that was really good. I remember SLR days. The 90 mil. The macro. The 90 mil 2.8, not the DI, but the 90 mil 2.8. It was a beautiful lens. I remember specifically like way cheaper. It was like $500 or $600 compared to everybody wanted $1,200 for the Canon or Nikon 105s, and optically fantastic. I love the manual focus clutch on it. Really, really good.
Yeah. We're going to get this lens soon to play with. And I think it's really important because on this podcast, multiple times, we've been like, I want Tamron primes again. Tamron make great primes. Why are we not seeing them? They made one, and it's a legendary focal length aperture combination.
Hopefully it'll be good optically.
That's super cool.
I'm sure it will. They're also great portrait lenses as a backup, right? It's always been a 2-for-1. So hopefully it'll be good for that. We'll check it out.
It's only $700 too, which again, it's a little bit more than the price you cited from
But we need it. We need it before Alberta turns into a ghoulish frozen hellscape. So
we're going to do some snowflakey pictures or something. Soap bubbles, Chris. It's soap bubble season soon.
Is it full fall there yet?
It's
full fall.
It's popping.
2 weeks of that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry,
we have
Jordan,
a very short fall season. No, it's all good. I just wanted to say as well, this is interesting to me because when we were looking at what Tamron was bringing out on Z mount, a lot of the time they were lenses that didn't overlap directly with what Nikon was doing. But Nikon has their new 100, I believe it's a 105, the current Z mount version, 2.8, which this is very directly competing with and quite a bit less expensive. So I'm optimistic that maybe this is a sign that Nikon's just opening the floodgates and like, look, you bring new stuff out, it's going to be available in our platform. I hope that's the case.
Mm-hmm. All right. So a few weeks ago, maybe even a month at this point, we were doing a story and had you check on it, Jordan. And it was that while we were aware there were going to be some limitations with using the older Canon battery in the new R5 Mark II, we discovered that there were some unpublished limitations as well, including the inability to shoot at 24p for some whatever reason.
Makes no sense.
Yeah, and you were out in the field when you realized this. Is that right?
Yeah, it was maddening because we had a brand new camera. You couldn't even buy LP6Ps yet because it was so new. So I brought a spare battery from the R6 II, most recent series, and we ran out of our initial battery, swapped over, and the only available frame rate was 30p, which I just was not expecting that. We also lost all eye compression, which was another unpublished thing that was very odd to me. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It's going to be less data that's moving through it. So Canon realized that was a silly, silly mistake, and thankfully they have released new firmware that unlocks that potential. I haven't updated yet. I'm very much because we're still working on an R5 II video. I don't update firmware mid-project, but we will have that rectified shortly.
Yeah.
Well, I hate to break it to you. That's not in the version that you don't have yet. They just said they just said, we understand it's desired. We will fix it in a future firmware release.
Don't they just have to uncheck like the red box of like disable with other? Isn't it like code? I'm not coding things. I'm not a programmer, but I assume it's a button.
Yeah,
Canon?
I don't know what the deal is, and
it is
also
it is not.
it is only going to unlock the 24p. It won't give you all eye.
Yes.
They're only giving us
decades have taught us that it is not just a simple click, because it's always like this. It's just terrible.
Yeah, it's odd that this was a thing to begin with. I think we would have been a little more forgiving if Canon published the limitations in full, but they didn't.
Yes.
And I'm not even aware that they've updated anything to say that those limitations exist now anyway. But it's nice to know that at some point, hopefully this year, 24p will come when you're using an older battery. Because there's no reason why it can shoot 30 and not 24. There's no reason why.
I would love to see, whenever you do this on any camera, we always get the message with current settings, some functions will be limited. And it's not just a Canon thing. We see this, and sometimes it's battery dependent. Sometimes it's a record mode that you've selected. Just tell me what is now disabled. Why do I have to go through and find out if the functions I need are no longer going to be available? It just seems like completely anti-user decision.
It's that classic, hey, I have an idea. You guys should put 24p in on the older batteries, and I have a better idea. Oh, we're going to put 24p capability with the old batteries. And
amazing. What a good idea you came up with.
Yeah. It's great job, Canon. But you still want to buy, make no mistake, get the P series batteries if you have an R5 Mark II. It's nice now that they're opening up more backup options, but you still don't want to do it.
And even if you have 24, it's important to note that's still going to be subsampled 24 with the older batteries. You're not going to get the quality that sensor's actually capable of.
Get the P. Everybody wants the big P.
PetaPixel.
Speaking of big P, phase one.
You had forgotten about this camera last week. You actually deleted it from your memory, which is incredible. But the timing then couldn't be better. Phase one has announced a new XC camera with a different fixed lens. I think it's a 40 millimeter, which translates to not 40. Right?
A classic landscape focal length. Cool.
They addressed one major complaint you had, Chris, which is that you could not buy this without also buying a digital back. They have now separated those items. So if you already own a phase one digital back, you don't have to buy another one.
Great. Also, it makes sense because if, let's just say, you were one of the 12 people in the world that has the financial means to buy the original one with the 23 mil lens, you wouldn't want to then have to buy another back, right? So now they're expecting you're going to get a whole, the goal is you would have multiple phase one XC bodies with different lenses and then swap backs. I mean, that is a very cool dream for the 1%.
1% might actually be too high.
Yeah, that's way too high.
So it used to cost $62,490 to buy this. But if you have one and you already spent $62,490, you now only have to spend $20,290 to just get
Holy hell, that's a bargain.
Back. Yeah, there you go.
Dude, I'm going to do it.
No,
Walmart would call that a rollback.
I could really use a new vehicle, but nah, this is more important. I'm gonna do it.
A quick hit here. ProGrade Digital, who I very much like their memory cards. They make very good memory cards. Finally released a SSD. So they have a standalone plug-in SSD that we tested, and while it might not have the fastest transfer speeds available for SSDs of this top quality, it has the most consistent performance over time. So
USB 4
for video.
USB 4. Yep. Really good for video. We didn't see it dip much at all in its performance over heavy workloads. Jeremy Gray reviewed it. He was pretty pleased with it. I'll link to his review in the description below. But there's this. The only thing I would say is it's a beefy boy. This is a big SSD.
It looks pretty big.
It's thick.
Strapping it to an iPhone.
But it comes with right. It comes with
it's
this
bigger
cable.
than the iPhone.
This cable is ProGrade's USB 4 cable, and this thing is incredible. I love this cable. And if
Do they sell the cable separately?
I don't know. Maybe
we should look into that. I should switch to all ProGrade.
These are very good cables.
Do you guys find that infuriating with USB-C? Just last week on the podcast, I grabbed a USB-C charger for my S5 IIX. That's my main camera. And it wasn't a cable that moved enough power to actually keep the camera topped up while it was rolling. So I was watching the red light blinking towards the end and damn, if only I had some sort of fancy cable, perhaps made by ProGrade, I wouldn't be dealing with this stressful situation.
Well, weren't we discussing this also with Lumix's wall charger. Like,
yeah, the wall charger is super fiddly. I got one USB A to C cable that'll work with it. That's it.
It's weird. It's not just usually it's the brick that's the problem. But in this case, it's because I have like the big thick one that you get with the MacBook. And usually anything I plug into that will work. And I think I used an Apple cable, and Lumix is like, nah, that's not going to happen.
No, when we went to Adobe to do our big podcast, you could see it in our room. I had a whole bunch of full Panasonic cameras all plugged into USB-C, charging things up. And then I had 2 external battery chargers that were useless because I didn't have the right type of A to C cable. So
super weird.
Oh man, we should just talk about cables for a whole podcast. That'll be our top rated.
I ran into this problem actually before our first podcast episode, where I stream on an A7R5 and it needs to have that high capacity cable, like the data rate cable. You know, whether it could be a power issue, sometimes it's a data issue. Luckily, I'd already bought one of those cables for my Quest VR set, because you need the same capacity to run it off of a computer if you want to have the link. So and I was struggling, like throwing all these cables in, even high-end ones, they're not working. Finally, I remembered, I got this cable for the Quest VR, and that does work to this day, but you need to have the right cables.
I checked. Yes, you can buy the ProGrade Digital USB 4 certified replacement cable. It's $40. It's very expensive. It's a really good cable, though. I've linked to it in the description below if you would like to join good cable life. Last story of the week. Chris, you can live your Death Stranding dreams. And I think you're going to try.
This is bananas.
This is bananas. You know what's funny? I haven't even played Death Stranding, but when Jaron showed me this product, right? And he's like, should we look at this? And then I'm like, that looks like something straight out of Death Stranding. Like, it looks like a post-apocalyptic backpack.
Confirmed.
In a cool way.
The designers are like, that's a cool backpack design when they saw Death Stranding backpack, and like, we're gonna make that.
They were actually inspired by the game.
Yes,
it looks like someone put a gas-powered generator onto someone's backpack. It's
correct.
It's wild.
I'll link to it in the description below. Go ahead.
Yeah, you got to see it, but it's like an exoskeleton, very lightweight aluminum folding exoskeleton.
I think it's plastic. Actually, it looks like it's aluminum. I think it's plastic.
Is it plastic?
It's plastic.
Dude, well, we'll see. But it then takes modular units. So you can buy specifically fit bags that will slot into, it looks like, basically, to simplify it, I mean, again, I want to play with it, but it looks like you basically have 3 slots. You got like a bottom slot, a large middle slot, and then an upper slot. And then you can buy different bags to customize for these different purposes.
Including...
might be a logistical nightmare, but in theory, it sounds really useful.
Not just bags, though, Chris.
No.
A giant battery.
A giant power station. Yes. And like up to 336 watt hours. Like that's pretty wild. Like, and it's you can get it wet.
Like mains AC out. It's crazy. It's not just like a few USBs. Yeah. What?
Yeah, weighs 6.5 pounds, which it's heavy for sure. But the idea is, like, I could see this for camping or adventure. I know they originally intended it for photographers and drone operators specifically, where you need to charge those drones while you're flying. Totally makes sense. But you could use this for camping. You could use this for beach parties. You could use it for fishing. Like it is a very interesting. But like all the ad photos, if you look, you gotta go look at the website.
I want to see these at Burning Man. They give off a huge like Mad 100%. Max Burning Man vibe.
Everybody in these pictures has got like bedrolls hanging off and lanterns hanging off, and then they have these arms you can attach, like selfie stick arms, so they got like phones above them for bird's eye view.
You could be fully bionic using this bag. I love when Jaron was texting this to Chris, I was beside him, and his initial thing is like, this is either the worst product I have ever seen or the best product, and there's only one way to find out. So we're going to find out.
We are going to find out. So this company was like, we really want you guys to look at it. And I'm like, I'm not going to guarantee coverage. We have no idea if this thing's any good. They're like, we understand. Can we send you one anyway? I'm like, okay, Chris, you get to live your Death Stranding dreams because we're going to send you one and you're going to put it on. I have concerns
I'm not
about
a young
weight.
man anymore.
Yeah, this is going to be heavy.
I'm not a young man anymore. The frame is 6 pounds alone almost. The pack is going to be 6.5 pounds.
So
like
if you don't put a power station on it, the backpack, the frame, and like just empty bags is 5.73 pounds. So it's not light. I think that battery pack weighs 5 pounds by itself. So it's like before you even put anything in there, it's gonna be beefy. And then, as Jordan says, it's got like stuff dangling off it in a lot of the pictures, like another bag
going through the bush. This is gonna be a nightmare going through the bush. I swear, I'm gonna catch every branch possible.
I want you selfieing. Replace me with this bag, Chris.
With
Come
arms
on,
sticking off
I'll
me.
send you some action cameras.
Yeah,
we'll see.
That's
Maybe
not
it's
a bad
the greatest
idea.
thing ever.
We're to send you out into the woods with cameras strapped to yourself, and you can
full,
just do your own. No Jordan at all. You're off by yourself.
We should remake our survival photography video, which I've always
with
loved.
Just this bag, and the whole thing is like it's so incredibly easy. You just hang out, plug a bunch of crap into it.
We haven't mentioned you actually can survive out there, Chris. There's a folding solar panel that flips out over it, so you charge it while you're walking, so you never have to return to the world. You could disappear into the Calgarian wilderness.
This is the backpack.
This is his last pod. We know what happened
for the apocalypse. Yeah, this is the backpack I want for the apocalypse when we give the world to our squid masters. So that's the one.
Octopus masters.
Oh man,
no, it's not octopus. No, it's octopi. Squid masters.
All right. Well, on that note, we're gonna talk to Jon Sneyers about
easy segue.
Yeah, about JPEG XL. I promise.
Not an easy segue.
I promise that segue will be smoother if we draw this out a little bit longer. And there we go. Perfect. Yeah, we're going to talk about JPEG XL.
Perfect.
Why you might want to use it, what it does, that sort of thing. And why not talk to someone who understands it very well? So let's just transition
and contributed to the code for it. Yeah.
That's right. So let's do it. And we are joined by Jon Sneyers. He's a senior image researcher at Cloudinary. He's also the editor of the JPEG XL standard and a contributor to the reference implementation that is being used by Apple and Adobe. And we're going to talk about JPEG XL.
Hey,
Jon, thank you. Yeah, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate having you here.
Thanks for having me.
And it's important because JPEG XL, it's a new format. Well, I mean, it's been around for a while, but this is the first time we've seen it now. The Apple iPhone 16, that's the first time I've seen it actually implemented. And, you start researching it, you start looking at it. I think there's going to be a lot of confusion out there, especially amongst photographers, on how this new format might be useful for them and how it's going to work. So we appreciate your expertise and thanks for being here. And so I guess the first question, Jon, is can you just give us a brief overview of what JPEG XL is and what it's sort of intended to do for us as from the standpoint of creators in the photography industry?
Mm-hmm. So JPEG XL is basically it's a new image format that was designed to be an image format, a still image format. In contrast to some other new formats like HEIC, like AVIF, like WebP that originate from video codecs, where then a single frame is used as a still image format. JPEG XL was really designed from the start for still images. So it's also designed for the entire workflow, the whole authoring workflow from capture to delivery, and not just zooming in on that final part of delivery only. As some other codecs do, they focus on web quality, but in JPEG XL, it's the entire workflow. So also lossless is a big part of it, which is of course important during production, but also like very high fidelity lossy, which can also be useful in production or in archival or in many other scenarios where maybe fully lossless is not necessary, but you do need a very good fidelity. So that's basically what it was designed for, yes.
Right. I think a lot of people are going to hear JPEG and they're going to think, okay, this is a compressed format. It's not what we would use as creators. We want the benefits of RAW. We want all the extra bit rate of RAW and the extra color. So is JPEG XL, is that going to be confusing for people? Because as I understand it, we're saving a lot of space, but we're not really giving up the image quality loss that traditional JPEGs would cause.
Yeah, of course, JPEG often gets associated with like 8-bit lossy image coding, which basically ruins all the dynamic range that you have, and it fixes the colors to whatever you choose at that point, but there's not much you can do afterwards. But that's not really fair to the old JPEG, because if you look at the DNG standard for digital negatives, the actual payload codec that was used before was lossless JPEG. So this is a not so well known part of JPEG, because it's not even supported by browsers actually. But JPEG can do lossless as well, and so JPEG XL is extending upon both the lossless and the lossy heritage of JPEG, but it's just improving them by a lot in terms of bringing it up to date with the compression techniques that are now available, which means we can do much better compression than what we could do with the old JPEG, which was in the end designed in the late 80s, and it was supposed to be, in terms of complexity, a low enough complexity to be feasible on the hardware of the early 90s. So we can do more now, and we can compress better. Also, there has been just progress in terms of the research that has been done on compression. So we can get better compression ratios, but still either being lossless or lossy. And in terms of lossy, we can also do much higher fidelity now, to the point that, well, it's technically lossy, but it's still good enough to preserve all of the dynamic range and all of the information that you need to be able to do editing.
Right. So
to give people just some context, if we were to compare the same file, a DNG, to a JPEG XL with the two different compression things, what kind of size benefits are we seeing?
So, well, the way that the iPhone is exposing JPEG XL is also through DNG. So it's just replacing the payload codec of DNG from lossless JPEG to lossless JPEG XL or lossy JPEG XL. So it offers you this choice. So I haven't played around with it myself yet, but from what I see, the lossless compression does give you like 40% savings compared to what lossless JPEG does. So, and this is exactly the same data as before, so you're not losing anything. The lossy part, this is where you can make a more substantial saving. And I think they went relatively conservative in terms of deciding what quality setting to use. So it's a very high fidelity setting that is not saving that much compared to lossless. Like it's still cutting off quite a bit, but you can go a lot lower in lossy and still have a usable picture. But I think they wanted to play it really safe and use a setting that allows you to have something that is as good as lossless, effectively. So there's probably some room for going a bit lower and still having something useful enough. But yeah.
Right. Okay, so right now we're used to working with a couple file types, generally with a camera, right? So we'll have our raw file, whatever that happens to be, and then we'll have our compressed file. Most of the time it's JPEG. You know, some people are using HEIF, but it's pretty rare. Is it going to be the same with JPEG XL, or is the idea that you would just now have one choice on your camera in the future? I choose JPEG XL, and then I can choose to either have, you know, a lossless version of that or a lossy version like you would a traditional JPEG? Or when you take a picture, are you going to get both in a file? How does that all work?
So I expect the most useful thing to do would be to pick a certain fidelity target that is suitable for what you want to do. If you intend to just shoot pictures and not do any editing on them, then probably you don't need that high fidelity compared to if you're planning to do a lot of editing. But you just take one picture and that's it. So I don't think there will be a need in the future to have multiple versions of the same image. Even what they're doing now in DNG, there's a preview image inside the DNG if I recall correctly, that is using traditional JPEG just for interoperability reasons. But you don't really need it if there would be enough software support to just support JPEG XL. You could as well have a single image that is like basically a very good quality image, and that can be used both for interchange and for production.
Right.
So
do you think that the manufacturers, like the big camera manufacturers, are still going to stick to having a proprietary RAW format, the name of their RAW file, and then just using JPEG XL as the payload for that RAW file to get better compression, smaller file sizes?
Well, before you answer that, actually, that leads directly into a question that we got about this from a listener. So I'll play that, and then you can answer the question.
Hi, guys. My question for you is, what do you think the future of JPEG XL format is? Do you think camera companies are going to run with it? I.e., do you think JPEG XL will replace JPEGs in camera?
My follow-up to this question would be, camera companies haven't been particularly, fast at taking in new formats. Like, we're seeing really slow implementation of content authenticity, and Heath and Heek didn't really make it into every new camera either, right? I don't think that's like a common thing. So like, that's another thing to add on top of this. What are the chances of actually seeing it? And do you think, and then adding to what Chris said, do you think that they're actually going to continue to use proprietary RAW formats?
So I think there's two aspects to this. One is, of course, cameras want to have something extremely interoperable, like the old JPEG that just works anywhere, and replacing that with something else that will not work in some scenarios is going to make people unhappy. So that's probably explaining why it's so hard in general to get new formats. And then if they're going to do something that's not going to work everywhere, I guess they might as well make it proprietary and make it only work in Lightroom and some other software, but not really being very open about how it really works. So I hope, the point of standardization and of JPEG XL is to have something interoperable that will allow basically all software to read the files, to write the files, and to have as little as possible proprietary data. I can still imagine that camera vendors would want to put some, like they put EXIF maker nodes inside JPEGs as well. They can put stuff in there that will still be proprietary, but at least you will have a baseline image that works anywhere. So I hope that we will get there, but I think for cameras, the main criterion will be the software support in the rest of the ecosystem, and that first has to be there. It has to be it has to just work anywhere, and only then I think can you abandon the old JPEG and switch to something new that is better.
Okay, so to follow up on that concept, Jon, what kind of barriers have to be overcome to make this successful, right? Like, I know a lot of companies have signed on. Browser support has been a big thing. Notoriously, I think Google was on board and then they weren't, and now they are again. And I know there was a lot of stuff there. So can you speak to what kind of barriers have to be passed so that this can then move forward? Because I'm assuming the idea is you want JPEG XL to be as ubiquitous as JPEG was, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there will of course always be legacy systems that are impossible to update and so on. So there will always be some scenarios in which you will just have to use the old JPEG. But I think that the main thing is, so we have Apple now that supports it out of the box in macOS, in iOS, and so on. We have Adobe adding support in their tools. We had Affinity and some other that did the same. Most of the open source world, like the Darktable and whatnot, are also adding support. So that's good. So I think the big ones that are still left are Microsoft, Windows, having its support out of the box, and then Chrome, the browser. So Safari supports it, but Chrome still doesn't support JPEG XL, and I think that's one hurdle that we will still
Isn't
have
that
to.
weird? Because isn't Google like a major backer of the format?
Yeah, I guess Google is a big company, and there's Google Research in Zurich who is working on JPEG XL. Very nice people that I work with on libjxl, that I've worked with on the standard itself as well. But they are not part of the Chrome team. They don't make the decisions on what Chrome does. That's a different team. So. Different departments of Google have different points of view, different agendas, So, but I mean, I don't think there is any reason in principle why Chrome cannot support it. It's just, it hasn't been a priority for now. And I think things can change now that Safari is supporting it. Also, Firefox has recently announced that they're looking into adding support. So if Chrome is going to be the only one left, then at some point, I think they will have to follow. But
well, you forgot about the very popular Microsoft Edge.
Yeah,
we all forgot about it.
This is one of the problems with the current state of web browsers. Basically, besides Safari and Firefox, which is relatively small, everything is or almost everything is Chromium. So including Edge, which is probably not going to do something that Chromium is not doing when it comes to decisions like this. So I expect once Chrome has added support, then all of the Chromium-derived browsers will automatically follow, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So
another question I have then, Jan, and this is going to sound like a silly question, but it kind of goes in topic with this of moving everybody over to JPEG XL. So I guess the question would then be, why? Like, why would we? We have lots of bandwidth now. Storage is cheap. Why would we move over to this format? Do we really need the extra compression? Are also on top of that, are we gaining any benefits to image quality over what we have now as far as raw files go, dynamic range? Are we getting any benefits, or is it going to be more of the same?
Yeah, so compression is one thing. I think the main thing is features, and I think the biggest difference between JPEG XL and the old JPEG is the precision you can achieve, the dynamic range. The de facto, the old JPEG is limited to 8-bit, and I think this is becoming more and more of a big limitation, in almost in the same way that the limitation of the GIF format to have only 256 colors is an obvious limitation. Most screens nowadays, or many screens at least, are 10-bit. And of course, cameras have an internal precision of typically 12, 14, or whatever more bits. So squeezing that down into the standard dynamic range and using the old JPEG is just not good enough. So JPEG XL has been designed around the concept of having an absolute color space used internally, which we call XYB, but doesn't really matter. The point is, it's a perceptual color space that can basically describe any color that is that can exist, and it's absolute not just in the sense of the color gamut and the primaries, but also in the sense of the brightness, and so it can natively capture SDR, HDR, as bright as you want, as dark as you want, and this allows us to do a kind of perceptual compression that is able to preserve as much fidelity as you want. So there's effectively no limit on the precision we can have. So I think that's what is going to make it future-proof. And I think the limitations of the old JPEG are going to become more and more obvious as time progresses.
So before Chris jumps in and asks another question.
No, I'm good. You're doing good.
One of the ones that I'm curious about is like, why did JPEG 2000 fail? And then like HEIC and HEIC, HEIC, aren't super popular either. So why does JPEG XL stand a better chance?
So, first of all, JPEG 2000, I don't think it's fair to say that it completely failed. It's still very widely used in digital cinema. It's still widely used in medical imagery. Of course, it didn't become as ubiquitous as the old JPEG. I think the main reason for that is, well, I think there's a few reasons. Maybe first one is that it was a bit early, in the sense that it was developed in the 90s, not that long after the old JPEG. Mm-hmm. The difference in terms of compression performance is also not that impressive. The main difference is in terms of functionality. It does have better functionality than the old JPEG, but it's not really compressing much better. But in terms of tooling, the open source tooling that was available was there was not a lot, so you had to use proprietary tools. There were licenses involved. This is also, I think, a major obstacle for adoption. So this is one of the reasons why with JPEG XL we wanted to have an open source reference implementation available that anyone can just use, to not have this kind of obstacle to adoption. So I think those initial obstacles basically prevented it from becoming more mainstream. Plus, the old JPEG was basically good enough. At least around the year 2000, there was not really a need to do HDR and so on. Yeah. So, except for medical images and some niches, it wasn't really needed. So I think, yeah, that also explains why people just stuck to the old thing. There was another question, but I forgot what it was.
Yeah, you're essentially saying that JPEG XL is fixing, or at least addressing, all of the things that made JPEG 2000 less popular, and that's why you think it has a better chance to succeed than the previous attempt, and plus it's been a while. So is that fair to say?
Yeah, also in terms of compression performance, which by the way I think still matters. There are still plenty of scenarios where you want to save some bandwidth, especially because we're using the internet not just on fast connections at home, but also on the go, while hiking, when maybe reception isn't very good. And you want to be able to still have websites that can load. So I think compression definitely still matters. Also, storage is still not cheap.
As a guy who runs a website with pictures in it, I can tell you that storage is not cheap. Even if we're only uploading small pictures every day, it adds up over time. So we would appreciate compression.
Yeah. But yeah, the difference between JPEG XL and the old JPEG is, well, I would say 50% at least, that you can reduce at the same quality. So it is substantial enough compared to what you got with JPEG 2000, which is more modest saving, and it also depends a bit on which encoders you use, and probably even the best available JPEG encoders right now are better than the JPEG 2000 encoders from a while ago. So
on that same related topic, we talk about things like social media, phones, bandwidth, having these quick uploads. Where do you see JPEG XL fitting into that kind of workspace? Because we mentioned, you said at the start, there's other alternative file formats, right? Largely based off of video codecs. And from what I've seen, they tend to be able to load quicker. They're more efficient for small image quality files like we would consume on Instagram and stuff, where you don't need high resolution and you don't need all this. So is JPEG XL able to do what those do, or do you think it's more primarily for higher quality images like we'd use for photography with the end goal of printing and that kind of thing?
Well, I think JPEG XL is definitely also suitable for the web. So basically, video codecs, they are designed around something like 0.05 bits per pixel as an operating point. So which means compressing 500 to 1, more or less. Whereas for still images, even web quality, you're basically typically looking at an order of magnitude less compression. And of course, these video codecs can also do that, but they really shine in the very low qualities where they can produce reasonable looking images at very low bit rates. So for some use cases, like if you really want to save as much bandwidth as possible and you're willing to sacrifice quality, yes, these video codecs are going to give good results. But for a lot of web use cases, you do want to have slightly higher quality than that. And I think from the point of like 0.5 BPP, I think JPEG XL is starting to become the best codec available, outperforming the video codecs. And currently, the median bitrate that is used on the web is something like 2 bits per pixel. So I think most of the range of web images, JPEG XL will still be the better choice. And especially if you want to have relatively high fidelity, like for instance, if you're running an e-commerce website and you want to sell something, you want that image to be good enough that people can really understand what they're buying, and that they can see like if you're selling clothes, you want the texture to be preserved. You don't want to smoosh it out with compression. So there's definitely use cases for that on the web as well.
Very cool. Yeah, thank you.
I want to be. Sorry, go ahead.
No. You haven't asked in a while. You go, Jordan.
So I'm going to be selfish here for a minute and just think about, like, how is this going to directly impact me? And one thing that I'm constantly frustrated in is we're testing all kinds of cameras, all kinds of lenses, and generally that means we're waiting for support on our editing software. Like every once in a while, we'll get a Leica or a Sigma or a Pentax camera that shoots DNGs, and that's a great day. I click my heels because it's like, oh, great, we have support for that immediately. We're not waiting for anything. So the JPEG XL standard, is that going to be one of those things where it's like, look, your editing system supports the information in that. When you see future products that support JPEG XL, it'll be able to understand it? Or is it something where there's still going to be proprietary information in the future imaging files where you're going to have to wait for updates to your software in order to support those?
Yeah, no, it's the first one. So basically, the whole point of an international standard is to have interoperability and to define in a specification how the file format works, so that if you implement it, and there's no, it's self-contained in that way. So once something adds JPEG XL support and it properly adds it, I mean, it supports all its features, then it's done, basically. Of course, in theory, there can be future new editions of the standard that add new features, like they did, for instance, also in the DNG standard. They now have a new feature which is using JPEG XL as a payload codec. So software does need to be updated for that. I don't think we want to do that with JPEG XL. So for now, we've made one revision to the standard, one second edition, which is no technical changes, just editorial changes to the standard. We want to maintain interoperability as much as possible, so even old versions of the reference software can still decode anything that the encoder is now producing. And this is very critical, I think, to have something that is guaranteed to be interoperable. That's the whole point of having a standard.
But I think I asked a similar question earlier about that. And is it possible, though, that the manufacturers are going to use JPEG XL as a payload, but still make a proprietary RAW file using it, because they want to limit it to their software, or because they want to put in certain EXIF markers and things like that? I mean, is it possible that we're still going to see that, as opposed to, essentially all manufacturers shooting DNG. I mean, they haven't up to this point, even though they could have.
Yeah, I guess on that note, also, like, can you think of any reason why, like, say, Canon would keep the CR3 file type versus JPEG XL? Like, any rational reason other than we want them to use our software? Is there any real, like, usability reason why they can't switch over?
Well, I don't know what all the image data, all the proprietary stuff they're doing, what it is. So
Of course, yeah. It's a secret.
Well, I think at least it should be possible to have to use JPEG XL in a way that the main image data, including the color space description and whatnot, is decodable on any implementation, and then you may have some additional metadata that is not critical to show the image. I think that's where I would want to go there. But of course, nothing prevents somebody from using JPEG XL as a payload codec in a proprietary format. There's not much we can do about that. I hope it won't happen, because I think the JPEG XL format, or using DNG with JPEG XL as a payload, is flexible enough to work for any use case. So I don't see any technical reason for not just doing that. I do see commercial reasons for doing it, but that's
yeah.
Well,
I have a feeling
the software isn't. They're not making money on selling us this software.
No.
They're giving us this crappy software for free, and we don't want to use it anyway. So I don't really know why they'd want to.
It gives you the appearance that it's your file, that you have ownership over it. There's something unique about it that other manufacturers can't do. I suspect. I mean, I think all the manufacturers will see the benefits of JPEG XL. Absolutely. I mean, why not offer smaller file sizes? This can improve things like burst rate potential, buffer performance, all that kind of stuff. We'll see real world, speed benefits with this new format. But I don't necessarily. I mean, I'm going to be pessimistic, but I think the manufacturers are still going to stick to proprietary formats. I mean, they could have all switched to DNG decades ago, right? Using lossless JPEG as the payload, which DNGs are using, and they still have chosen not to do that. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. I'm skeptical.
So one thing that I think will be needed in any case, whether they want to do it as a payload codec in their proprietary thing or as actual interoperable JPEG XL files, I think probably they will want to wait until there's a hardware encoder, available. So currently, I know people are working on that, but currently, what Apple is doing, for instance, is software encoding, which works if you have a beefy CPU like in an iPhone. But if you want to have a good battery life and not have to include an expensive CPU, then you need a hardware encoder. So I think cameras will probably wait for that. But I hope it's going to happen soon. People are working on this.
Really, what I'd like to avoid is the current situation where, like, we wait for Apple to add support for a RAW file in a camera that came out 2.5 years ago. That's brutal for someone who wants to use like Pixelmator, for example. Up until, I don't even know if they've done it yet, but up until like just a couple months ago, they couldn't open RAW files from a camera that was released 2.5 years ago, which is bananas and wild to me. Like, this would solve that problem because everyone would be using the same thing. You would never have to worry about it again. If we were on a press trip somewhere working with a brand new camera that's unannounced and it was shooting JPEG XL, we could edit the RAW files immediately as opposed to needing to wait or use bad software. So I see all of the advantages in addition to the ones that Chris pointed out, where you could feasibly get way faster burst rates because it's just smaller files. It just makes more sense, and do them for longer even. But yeah, maybe I'm with Chris on being a little bit unsure if that'll happen, given that the support for DNG has been pretty lackluster.
I mean, the dream of having a camera where you just have one file type and you can choose, you're going to save space regardless. You can choose a level of compression if you want more of like a classic JPEG, kind of very easy to share, or just have that raw image quality, at a small file size. It's a beautiful idea. So that would be very nice. That'd be very simple. I think a lot of people would appreciate that. As I understand too, Jan, if I do shoot like a full quality, let's say the largest JPEG XL file format, I can easily switch that to a very compact, very small file if I need to, like very, very straightforward process, right?
Yeah, it's basically just transcoding. Effectively, even the reference software can just do that for you. If it can take JPEG XL as input and produce a new JPEG XL file that is like, you can take a lossless JPEG XL as input and produce a lossy one at whatever quality you want. I anticipate that for sharing on the web, you will probably want to use still a lower quality than what you want for editing workflows. That's not going to change. But at least it will no longer be necessary to have multiple versions lying around. You can have one file that is viewable in all software, but also high fidelity enough to be editable.
Yeah, very cool idea.
Jan,
that's all the questions I have.
Thanks. Yeah. Jordan, do you have anything you wanted to end with? Otherwise, that's all I got too.
No, I just think like it's exciting to finally move away from, like you said, something in the late 80s. I'm a huge proponent of HDR photos. I think it immediately offers more visual benefit than just throwing megapixels and things at it. So any movement towards a glorious, 10-bit HDR world, I celebrate. And you know what? I'm going to say I'm optimistic. Hopefully we will see that JPEG XL supported by the camera manufacturers without the proprietary stuff, but only time will tell. But it's nice to know that there is the potential for that out there.
I think the key thing to really get JPEG XL moving is exactly what we're doing right now, which is get photographers and creators understanding the benefits of what it can do for them, getting some of that misinformation out there, understanding exactly how it'll make their lives easier, and then I think the demand comes and the companies will start to recognize that. So I appreciate you coming on here and educating us all, Jan. That's it's a very, very useful information. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we're back, and that was awesome. I mean, it's really important to understand. More important to understand even than JPEG XL is the fact that squid have really large eyes, okay? And that has benefits for interpreting color, seeing prey or potential, anyways, like predators and stuff. So that's why squid are going to be
That's your way of saying thanks for joining us on the pod, Jan. Yes. That was great. Yeah.
Jan, thank you. Yeah.
I have no words. Other than dreaming of a future where squids rule the earth, Chris, what have you been up to?
Other than squids, not much, man. It's been a busy week. Obviously, Jordan and I, we've been doing a lot of videos this last week. Out enjoying the fall colors, I would say. That's the one benefit is, one of our videos, it was like nasty and wet. And then the other video, it was just beautiful and yellow and warm and super nice. So, yeah. Enjoying the fall colors.
And that's all coming out here very quickly.
Yeah.
While we were out enjoying those beautiful fall colors is what I've been up to this week. We were shooting and I was wearing, I would say, a slightly loose fitting t-shirt while we were filming, and a wasp flew up into my t-shirt. And I'm like, what is that feeling? Oh no, that's a sting that just happened on my belly, which, it hurt. That's annoying. I was just slightly aggravated for the rest of the shoot, but I didn't know the terrible consequence of this is, in like cartoons and movies, the shorthand for like a big dumb guy is somebody scratching their belly. Like, that's why we criticize people at baseball games. Like, you want a pitcher, not a belly itcher. This thing got so itchy. And now I'm just like walking around like a lummox, just like, constantly scratching my itchy belly because of this wasp sting on it. And I think it makes me look like a loser, which is why the podcast, I'm delighted, is framed kind of here up. So you might hear occasional like... some of that.
You could have a new career. You could have a new career. You walk around on camera, scratching your belly in a shirt, bed hair, and yawn, and you could be like every dad in every single ad.
I'm the before, in a product, just ad, look at this loser who can't get his life together. But now with blank, you can.
There's
blank.
a guy from the movie Dodgeball where they're doing the car washing scene where he's like, "Get in there, nice and deep, black," and he's scratching his stomach when he says it. That's you.
See? Yeah, that's me.
Perfect.
In public,
that's Jordan
right now.
That's Jordan now. Yeah.
Okay. You guys know this, but the listeners don't. I cleaned up my basement, my storage room, and I re-coordinated everything, and I put stuff up on racks, and I moved a table around, and I prepared it for my film processing station. So I'm getting closer and closer to having my everything set up to support my shooting with film dreams. So that's what I spent my weekend doing.
You're going hard in the paint on analog. This is exciting. You're passionate about photography.
I'm having
hard
fun.
in the paint has been a real theme this month.
Yeah.
Hard in the paint is the best thing to say.
Yeah, basketball.
Jaron, can you throw up some images of that so our viewers can look at
going
the
hard in
space?
the paint? Oh, seeing. I thought you meant throw up images of things going hard.
Just put the words "going hard in the paint," white text, black background.
Sure, I'll toss up some photos of my workstation. I also got a cabinet that I have filled with all of my camera equipment, both digital and film. I've got it organized now, and I think I'm going to set my my main charging station in there too for like batteries and whatnot. Even though the batteries that my Bessa takes are like the small little watch batteries. I have a bunch of those. So anyway, I'm excited to go shoot with it. You
could just put a backpack in there as your charging station, Jaron. Just stick that beside the desk and attach a bunch of stuff to it.
Before we move on, I do want to mention, Chris, I am going to the Japanese garden this weekend, actually, just to enjoy it because we're members there.
Photography. Oh, I bet you the colors are going to be gorgeous.
I hope so. I hope that
is it
starting to turn.
Is it transitioning there yet?
A little bit. I wouldn't say we're peak yet. I would say it'll be a little bit of color. But I've got some color film that I'll use, except right now in the Bessa is black and white only because that's what came with it when I got it from KEH. It came with a roll of film in it.
Yeah.
And it's black and white.
I bet the Portland Japanese Garden in early October is probably like a straight up zoo. It's like a straight up Metallica concert in Russia. Like,
just so many people in there. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, we'll find out.
Guys, while we're doing, I just have to interject while we're doing what we've been up to, because last week we teased a competition that the audience does not know the results of, which is Chris was spitballing exposures during our last trip. And we were going to come to the conclusion. So I said that I thought 30 of them were going to be exposed correctly because Chris was just throwing out exposure numbers at Jaron while he was shooting.
Jaron, didn't have a light meter, right? So Sunny 16 rule and then just making adjustments based on visual.
Yeah.
Jaron, I believe you said 40 were going to be correctly exposed.
Out of how many shots?
72 shots.
That was going to be out of 2 rolls. So I have an update. One of those rolls, and
I said all of them, right?
Yes,
we're going to be perfectly exposed.
So before I say how many were perfectly exposed, Chris, you actually expressed, like, you kind of looked at me funny once during this trip, and I'm like, I don't know, it seems to be fine. One of those film rolls was not advancing. So one of those rolls didn't work out. So that is my bad. I looked at it. I thought I had the teeth in there, and it was gripping and pulling, but it wasn't. So now we're down from 70.
And I even said, right, I was like, hey, double check.
Is that moving?
Is the film advance
popped
lever
the
moving?
back open, and I was like, it looks like it is. And nope. Anyway, so we're down from 72 back down to 36.
So we'll just do it by ratio.
Chris is correct. He was 100% accurate. Every single shot was exposed correctly.
Goodness.
There were a couple that were
crazy.
There were shadows he could not have known his eyes were exposing for. He was just exposing for like where the main light was coming from. That were a little dim, those shadows, but that's not his fault. He was 100% on everything. So good job, Chris. Like when we were up on the...
So that's why you should keep watching our YouTube show, because clearly this guy knows what he's talking about. We have evidence now.
We were up on Corona Heights, I believe, where we had to leave Jordan in the car because of his boot, and we went up and we were just shooting the city. And we were like shooting a couple different things, and I asked you for at least 3 different exposures during that, and all of them are on. So good job.
Oh, fantastic! Well, I'm glad. You know what? I'm not happy that I got it right. I'm happy that you got shots that you liked.
Me too.
It's too bad about that. That one roll that sucks. We all have done it. We've all been there. Yeah.
All the Golden Gate Bridge
religiously
log shots are
check.
in, by the way. They're all in, all perfectly
Oh, nice.
exposed.
Oh,
so.
nice.
Yeah.
Dang.
Good job.
Dang. I religiously check my advanced lever every single time. And I even had to break out some exposure stuff with, where we are playing with the new Mint Rolei 35 AF. So I had to break out that for some shots too. So let's see how it turns out. Should have that back any day, any minute.
You should feel pretty confident based on your performance with my Nikon F. So
dang.
All right. This week, our tech support is almost, I would say 95% speak pipes because I had so many, and some of these are obviously older. So I apologize for taking so long, but we're going to get to them right now. Let's start with one from Phil.
Hey guys, my name is Phil. I am a freelance videographer and filmmaker based in the Boston area. I have a question about the 24-70 lens options for the S5 IIX and the Blackmagic full frame. Those are the two cameras that I shoot my video content with. I do not have any sort of 24-70, and I'm looking at the Sigma Mark II as well as the Panasonic version. Now, the Mark II looks great because it's lighter weight. It's got the aperture ring, but I am seeing that some people still swear by the Panasonic 24-70 as having the better micro contrast, focus breathing, and overall just a better image. They're about $200 apart at B&H with my education discount. So pricing wise, I'm not too worried. I'm just wondering from you guys what you think would be the recommended option for the 24-70 since I am primarily doing video work. Thanks guys. Love the podcast. Keep it up.
Wow, you're referring to the 24-70 Panasonic lens that's filming me right now. How's that micro contrast in 1080p, everybody?
Non-existent.
I have absolutely compared these two lenses, and I'm actually going to say the Sigma is a little bit sharper, if that is your top priority. But for video, the Panasonic has a real advantage in that there is less breathing, as you mentioned in your article. But the big one for me is it has a mechanical focus clutch. So you can flip the autofocus ring out and actually pull focus by hand. It's extremely responsive. It's one of my favorite lenses for doing manual focus pulls. So if you do a lot of that, then that might definitely be the decider for you. But if you're generally just relying on the autofocus, because you've got an S5 IIX with good autofocus, I'd actually grab the Sigma lens because it is a little smaller, lighter, and again, just sharper.
All right. I concur. Yeah. Sigma for photography, Panasonic for video.
The next one is from Adam Spurgeon.
Hello, Jordan, Jared, and Chris. I got into photography at the start of the pandemic as something to do, and it's gotten a little out of hand. Despite my early resolutions to not be that guy with the big white lenses, I've amassed an anxiety-inducing collection of cameras I have no business owning, and every G Master Prime from 14 to 600 millimeters, minus 35 and 85 for obvious reasons. I've started to sell my lesser used items, including the X106 I've somehow managed to get, so Jaron, if you're interested, I have moral convictions against scalping and will be in Portland this weekend. But there's no getting around the fact that some of the most satisfying pictures I take involve birds in flight with $20,000 worth of optics. My question has to do with insurance. Are line items policies actually worth it as opposed to relying on homeowners insurance? Do you or anyone you know have any experience trying to make a claim on a stolen or destroyed piece of gear? Or is anxiety simply part and parcel with getting in way too deep?
That's
a good question.
Chris answers this. I will say I apologize. This is why I apologize for taking so long to get some of these. This weekend you were in Portland was probably like over a month ago, if not longer. So I would have been interested at the time, but Chris made me spend that money on a Bessa. So that itch has been scratched.
I'm the worst. Everybody. I'm sorry. I'm a terrible person.
Do you have any input on this, Chris?
No, not really. That's what I was going to say is luckily, I haven't personally, I don't think Jordan has either. I haven't personally had any issues with theft or damage or anything on the gear. And we do have a fair amount of expensive gear in our houses because we're transitioning through new products all the time, right? I mean, Leicas and everything like that come in and then go out and all that kind of stuff. In how I've interpreted it, I don't know that I would worry about line-by-line items necessarily. I would just make sure that you have a policy coverage rider that does cover the monetary value you need to, and then absolutely document the stuff that you own. You can take photos of it, serial numbers, and then that should be okay. But I would be more interested in hearing from the audience, from the listeners and the viewers, because I'm sure some of you unfortunately had some accidents and problems, and you could give better insight. Yeah.
I will say that I don't think you should trust homeowners insurance with this. I don't know if it's any different now. I doubt it. Insurance hasn't gotten better. They're not like more willing to pay out than they were 5, 6, 7 years ago. But I had this conversation several years ago with many photographers at WPPI. Actually, I went around and was asking people like what they were doing for insurance, and I heard from people who had lost gear, and homeowners insurance was not helpful or underpaid the value or didn't want to pay at all. And it was a mix of they didn't necessarily photograph every item they owned, or even if they did, the homeowners insurance was like, well, it's not actually worth that much, or they would try and fight you on it. If you are concerned, there are specifically photography insurance companies that I would recommend you look into instead. Those are the ones that know what they're getting into. They don't tend to be very expensive as far as insurance goes, and will actually do a better job compensating you for lost gear. I would caution against relying on homeowners insurance personally, from what I've heard. But
there you go.
Take that for what it's worth. The next one is from Liam.
Hey, Chris, Jaron, and Jordan. I recently bought a Fujifilm X-T50 and I'm loving it. It's a fun little camera that I can take everywhere I go. On researching Fujifilm, one of the things I heard many people talk about in reviews is the color science and how people feel they can get better colors out of their Fuji cameras than other brands. I always thought this was just BS and people buying into hype and marketing around Fuji film simulations. But now I have a Fuji and I've edited a few files, and I think I'm starting to understand what people mean. It feels at least a little bit easier to achieve the look that I want to with these files, a little more filmic than it is with my Sony a7 III. Why is that? Am I just being Fuji-pilled? Also, why does Capture One handle Fuji files better? Does Adobe not see enough market among Fuji owners to improve raw demosaicing in Lightroom? Can you explain the business relationship between Capture One and Fuji? Is it purely a marketing opportunity, or is there a deeper business tie? Please let me know if I'm going crazy or not, and thanks for your insight. Again, love the show.
Thanks for loving the show, Liam. It's not BS, but it is marketing and hype to some degree. I mean, all you have really good questions here, and they're all kind of right. I mean, I guess let me start with this. I personally don't think that there's a real benefit color-wise one brand to another. Not at all. But certainly there are benefits to how a manufacturer might represent their color. And we've seen this, and we should do another JPEG shootout. It's been a long time. But even doing our black and white profile shootout, it was fascinating to see how every manufacturer takes different approaches to what they want their profile to look like. In the end, with enough work, you can edit any file to look like any other file pretty much. But there is something to be said for having a brand of camera where the profile just looks the way that you like it. And I mean, this is further complicated by the fact that, of course, every camera has multiple profiles in it. If you don't like that, you can always just download, make your own, or buy presets that will get you a look right away, and you might like that approach. There's so many ways to getting to the end result. But if you find that Fujifilm's color is close to what you personally prefer, that's awesome. I find, of course, using so many different brands of cameras every single week, I have to adjust for every single file if I want to make it look the way I want it to look. And there are differences. They're subtle. I don't think anything's like groundbreaking. As for Capture One, I mean, Jordan might have more information here too. Certainly when Fuji was using their X-Trans sensors, Adobe had a really hard time, the software, actually interpreting that
initially,
properly.
Yes.
Yeah, initially. And that was fixed later on, but that led to a very sort of good relationship between Fujifilm and Capture One. And also it just puts it in your head. If people, what's interesting about this from the hype and marketing standpoint, and we see this with a lot of brands, is that when people start getting on the forums and talking about, Fujifilm color is really good, or Canon JPEG was another big one, really nice color, blah, blah, that does stick with people. And that's actually a really interesting selling point. And so people are saying this software works really well with this brand. That also becomes a really clever way of marketing that, because people want simple, they want easy, and it can be a very confusing mess. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll just jump on that I did jump over to Capture One because I was using a Fujifilm X-T3 as the personal camera, and I just found what a lot of people did, that the raw files opened nicer with less work required in Capture One to get them to a place I was happy with. The thing about Adobe is there was a period where it was actually giving you softer results. It wasn't just a color issue, and that has been rectified. Now, whether or not you bring it into Adobe in the colors and contrast or where you want it, that's up for debate. But it is now a nice detailed image when you open up those X-Trans files in Adobe software now.
All right. Next one is from Doug.
Good morning, Chris, Jaron, and Jordan, in no particular order. This is Doug from Ohio, and I'd like to pick your brain with 2 questions. First question. I shoot both digital and film photos and occasionally order large prints for display in my home. Is there any particular advantage to printing images analog over more modern methods like inkjet printing and sublimation? And when, if ever, would you consider having your images darkroom printed? Second question. Internet curmudgeons say, film doesn't make your bad photos good. But similar to the response Chris had to his Pentax 17 photos, whenever I shoot a roll of 35mm film, even my objectively imperfect photos feel special. What is going on? Is this nostalgia or a consequence of the process? Is the Emperor wearing any clothes?
To answer your first question, Doug, and the advantage to printing darkroom versus like analog versus inkjet print or sublimation, that's a really big topic. I mean, I would break it down to, it would really come down to artistic intent. I don't think there's anything inherently beneficial, except it goes to the experience that you want to have. Being in a darkroom is a magical experience that no sitting in your office printing, inkjet prints will ever come close to. Okay. But at the same time, it comes down to paper choice. Inkjet gives you so many different options for finishes, for textures, for materials. Whereas traditional analog, it's more limited in that regard. It's very easy to tone with inkjet, whereas, of course, with analog, it's a bit more difficult, but that can be really fun too. And so really it comes down to your personal preference for how you want that artistic print to look. I wouldn't personally do a lot of darkroom, like digital photos to darkroom. I feel like the real magic for me, having had a darkroom for so many years, was really putting negatives into the enlarger, using my hands to block and mold light and dodge and burn. Like I really like that. That's a cool part of the experience, and I think that's where the magic is. As for, does analog cover up? It was interesting, like I'm shooting the same eyeballs, but everybody loved the Pentax 17 photos. And they're like, oh, these are some of the best shots that Chris has ever taken. I think that would then come down more to the experience of actually using an analog camera, how you shoot, the way you shoot, maybe being more conscientious of taking a photo or maybe being less conscientious, just kind of being like, it's analog, it's fun, it's Pentax, boom, just take some grab shots. So I appreciate that people liked that. Analog absolutely has a unique look to it. There's a unique feel to it. And so I don't think that's just all nostalgia. I mean, it's all about what kind of feeling, what does it emote to you as the viewer? And I think that's an important thing.
Yeah, Jaron, you're throwing hundreds of dollars at developing every other week, it seems. Tell me, what do you think?
I don't like that you phrase it like that. Throwing, just like
Jaron's at early stage here.
Yeah, I have no opinion yet. Give me some more time. I'm not going to do
updates to follow.
I mean, I guess I could. The thing is, as Chris was talking, I was like, I do remember doing my own analog printing in college when I had access to the darkroom at Gonzaga. I could easily convert my basement into a darkroom. It's not hard at all. There's only two windows in there that are small. I could cover them up. I don't think I will.
Don't even cover them up. Just put red gels over them. It's awesome.
Just looks cooler.
Dude, because then
you don't have to worry about it. Yeah, if you're doing black
I would
and
just
white.
during the day I would just put red gels. Anyways, that's but it works. It works great.
It'll look like the Red Room from Twin Peaks. It'll be great, Jaron. Very moody.
All right. Well, I'll think about it some more. Next one's from John Baker.
I would find it very helpful for there to be a cell phone camera app where I can control my iPhone or Android camera, where I'm able to actually see the equivalent focal length that it would be on a 35 millimeter camera. So, for example, I would like to be able to choose whether I'm using a 35 millimeter focal length or 50 millimeter focal length. And the reason why is so that I can test out different focal lengths before I purchase or rent a lens. For example, it would be nice to be able to see on my iPhone camera how far away from me is 75 or 90 or 85 millimeters. So if you know that this exists, if you would be able to point it my way, or if anyone in the audience is able to create something like this, I think that would be really helpful. Anyway, thank you guys so much. Take care.
You kind of sort of can with the new camera app. I mean, there's nothing where it will tell you a specific focal length in your zoom range, but
it does 28 and 35. It actually says, and then the 2X says 50.
Let me finish. Because what John's trying to do is John is trying to test specific focal lengths beyond just the fixed ones that the iPhone has. So when you're in the zoom, it will show you like 4 or 5 options throughout the zoom range that relate to their digital cameras and their actual cameras. But in between that, there's no focal length setting. So you couldn't particularly dial in like what does a 45 look like or what does a 90 look like, because the phones don't necessarily have that focal length in there. So there's nothing like that. But you can kind of guesstimate it.
There are 2 apps. I've thought about these before. The Director's Viewfinder app. So it's mainly for video purposes, but I've found 2 Director's Viewfinder apps that will give you close to what you're looking for, I think, where you can see the focal lengths on the right, and it will actually show you what that looks like. The design here is you would eventually use this in film. So I think this would work. There's one called the Magic Cinema Viewfinder, and then there's another one that's called the Cadrage Director's Viewfinder. One of them is free, the first one, and the second one is $20. So they're both rated the same, 4.7 out of 5, but there's more ratings for the one that's paid than for the free one. You could see if those would work for you. I don't know if they would be perfect because they might actually go in widescreen because it's video, but you can get a better idea, I think. Anything else? No? Yeah? Jordan? No? All right. Hopefully that helps, John. Next one is Tom from North Carolina. This one's for Jordan. So let's listen in.
This is a question for Jordan. So, hi, Jordan. I'd like to appeal to your expertise, knowledge, and seemingly good taste, and ask you a technical question as a follow-up to a comment that you made a week or 2 ago. So, as a completely inexperienced cook, can you please expand on that hot wing recipe and preparation that you briefly talked about? I'd like to prepare a surprise for my wife. Thank you.
Okay, so here's the thing. If you loop back to that episode, I was saying, hey, Chris, thank you for the advice that you gave my wife so we could make some banging hot wings. So this is actually a question for Chris, who is now going to reveal his secret. Go!
Oh, I thought we talked about, I thought we talked about this at that episode, but the key thing is when I make my hot wings and I do a sort of dry batter first that you're going to put them in. So I rinse them, got to rinse them. Then you got to dry them with paper towel. Don't use them wet. And then I do like salt, pepper, flour, but you got to put in baking powder, and you want aluminum-free baking powder. Very important. And, not too much. Don't do like a half ratio. It's way too much. It's going to taste funny. But make sure you put baking powder in there. It crisps up the wings. Really works well. That's the key.
Next one's from Earl. Let's listen in.
Yeah, so I just wanted to ask, is there a dynamic range hit when I switch to the Super 35 mode on my full frame camera? I know and understand that Super 35 has dynamic range compromises compared to full frame because of the amount of light gathered on the sensor. But I just want to know, if I have my full frame sensor and I crop in on the sensor and I capture that windowed in Super 35 or APS-C for you photo folks image, does that also affect my dynamic range the same way that a Super 35 or a PSC sensor would also have reduced dynamic range? Thank you very much for y'all time. I appreciate y'all and all y'all do for this podcast, and I look forward to you guys answering my question.
Why we're smiling is because Jaron tells us to speak pipes and he reads them, and he actually did it with a southern accent. It was adorable. But yeah, Jordan, why don't you go ahead on this one?
Yeah, so basically, if you're cropping in on your sensor, you're going to have the exact same clipping point in your highlights. What'll happen is the shadow noise will increase, and when we rate dynamic range, we generally do it in terms of like how much is usable between the highlights and shadows until the noise in the shadows overtakes the image, and you'll hit that point generally a stop lower. So if you actually pop onto Bill Claff's site, Photons to Photos, a lot of the time he'll put the DX dynamic range in there, and you'll almost always find it's exactly a one-stop difference on that. So that's why more shadow noise, because you're magnifying the shadow noise more.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the only thing I would add on that is, like, you know, when thinking about noise levels, think about also like how you're going to view that image, right? I mean, a big part of it is the more you magnify it, the larger you're going to view it, the more you're going to see that noise. That's why often like people get confused that high megapixel cameras have worse noise. That's not necessarily true, because high megapixel cameras, you'll actually have less magnification for the same viewing size as maybe another camera. And so any noise that is there is reduced in size physically, and so it appears less. So always think about your final image and how it's going to appear.
All right. Next one is from Micah Trailer. Let's listen in.
Why are there no one-to-one standard fast macro zoom lenses? Like, I know that Sigma and Tamron both made like macro zooms, but those sucked apparently. And I like, the closest thing I can think of to this is like the Sony 70-200 f4G, but I think that's a 1:2 macro if I'm not mistaken. So like I just want to know, is it like a manufacturing thing? Is there like some compromise to optics? Like, what is the reason why there aren't any fast macro zooms?
I think it's because it would basically be impossible or near impossible without being gigantic and expensive. I mean, the main rule with any optical formula is the more that you ask it to do, the more expensive it has to be, the larger it has to be, and the more compromises there have to be somewhere else. So, you know, there are some okay macro zoom lenses that can do pretty decent macros, but never 1:1 that I've seen. 1:2 is even quite rare. And even then, if a lens can do that, that doesn't mean it's going to be sharp there or have good close-up performance at that macro range. So it's a confusing story. But generally, if you want a good 1:1 macro, you really should go to a fixed lens to do that.
Yeah, and the other thing too is when they advertise the macro reproduction ratio, that's at one part of the zoom range on there. Yeah. So like that 24-70 is not getting you 1:2 throughout the entire range, and that's the same with most lenses. I'm sure they could do it. I just don't think the demand is there, because generally, if you're doing extreme close-up work, you pick your focal length and then you physically move the camera and lens back and forth. Is the most common technique for it.
Sometimes on those zooms too, like Jordan said, like the macro will be best at the wide angle, and that can be fun from a visual point of view, but at the same time, your working distance, the actual amount of space between the lens physically and that subject gets so minimal that you're either scaring it away, or you're blocking the physical light that's falling on it, or it makes it angry and it stings your belly button. So yeah, keep that in mind.
Next one is a question from Varun.
Hey Jordan, Jaron, and our premier PetaPixel Podcast Papa Chris. My name is Varun, and I'm from the USA, and I've been trying to decide whether I should pick up a used Nikon D780 or D850. I'm a hobbyist photographer. I'd be mainly using this camera for shooting nature, landscape, and wildlife. I've used a Z6 in the past, and I really loved the files that came out of that. Just wasn't a huge fan of the handling and just realized I prefer a DSLR. And yeah, I was initially thinking of just the 780 because it's the same sensor and just with the DSLR handling. But, you know, while I was looking at DSLRs, I thought, you know, the D850 is also a really good option. So I don't know, my main question is, do you think the D780's viewfinder autofocus, while definitely not as good as the D850's, would still hold up for casual wildlife photography? Or would the D850 be a better option with its better viewfinder autofocus and higher resolution, although much worse live view functionality? I mostly shoot handheld too, so would I get the most out of the resolution of the D850 versus this D780? I've never really felt the need to go beyond 24 megapixels either. Is the live view functionality of the D780 a good selling point? Let me know. Really appreciate everything you guys do, and looking forward to hearing back.
Varun, you can call me Daddy. That's cool. I appreciate that.
He said Papa. He's not going to call you Daddy. It's very different.
Semantics.
The Papa's so much less objectionable than Daddy in my personal estimation. But go
what
on,
about Papi? Papi, you're right back to that same connotation. You guys, you just can't let me have anything.
Anything, nothing.
Nothing.
I wouldn't necessarily worry about the viewfinder.
The best years of my life. Go ahead.
I wouldn't necessarily worry about the live view functionality. For wildlife photography. I mean, might be handy in some situations, but certainly, the 780 and the 850. I think you'd find very similar autofocusing performance. I do like having higher resolution when it comes to wildlife. You do make a good point about hand holding, but you're generally going to be shooting fast shutter speeds for wildlife anyways. Hand holding, though, that is a good factor. I mean, if you're hand holding slow shutter speeds, all the megapixels of the world don't do any good if they're blurry. But I think you'll be okay. I like having the higher resolution. Other wildlife photographers, because I'm not one specifically, can chime in here, but I do like having the higher resolution just for croppability. Larger print sizes, lower noise, if you're not going to crop. So yeah, I would say 850 still has some benefits. I don't think you notice much of an autofocus difference, personally.
Yeah, if you're living on the viewfinder, I think the 850 makes the most sense. Just be aware that LCD autofocus is terrible. So that is the trade-off you're making.
I just can't
the
see
780. It's like a mirrorless camera.
Yeah.
Three more. And these might go quick. So here we go. This one is from Daniel Dallacasa.
Hey guys, Daniel Dallacasa. Just listened to your R1, R5 Mark II podcast. Excellent podcast. I like long podcasts that are detailed. Kudos. Hey, I'm a longtime Canon user. Switched over to mirrorless R1, R5 with several lenses. And I'm really concerned about what I heard. I was expecting Canon to do better than what they've done on that R1. Are we just seeing, as you mentioned, that they cannot keep up with Sony on sensors? And the sensors, that's where it's at. Should I take a time out, and switch over to Sony and just bite the bullet? I don't want to do that, but man, I don't want to be sending money to people that do things like that to Rudy, and we all know what that's about. They want to change their image, and Rudy just doesn't fit it anymore, and they're just basically a corporation that's not loyal. Anyway, thank you, man. Be safe.
Thank you,
Justice
Daniel.
for Rudy.
Be safe. Be safe to you too. I mean, I don't think that, yes, what they did to Rudy, that's sad, but I don't think you're going to find a difference amongst all the manufacturers in that regard, personally.
They're all corporations.
That's just a Canon thing. Yeah, that's corporations. That's business. I wouldn't switch. We've seen Sony make great sensors, and if you want to get right down to the technicalities, Canon do tend to bake in raw noise reduction into the raw files, and that hurts a little bit. The noise levels look good, but you're getting softness in some degree. But at the same time, sensor technology has plateaued, as we've talked about on the podcast many times. Everybody's kind of caught. Canon take beautiful photos. I don't think you're going to really notice an appreciable benefit moving up to Sony in regards to the sensor. Unless you're looking for something specifically specialized like the global shutter. But no, I wouldn't switch over. Canon take great photos. They take great pictures. Their new cameras like the R5 Mark II, very quick shooting, decent readout speeds. Yeah.
Yeah, I think if we were having this conversation 5 years ago, it would be, that was when Canon was really lagging behind. Since the release of the R5, R6, they've made some nice strides. And I think they're, yes, in some regards, like they don't have a global shutter, they don't have a high resolution, super fast readout body. They are slightly behind the other manufacturers, but it's not enough to warrant the huge investment of switching systems, I don't think.
Yeah.
All right. The next two are written, no more speak pipes. I got an email from Peter. I have seen your videos regarding the Leica Q3 options and found them very informative. Thank you. I have ordered a 28mm Q3 a few weeks ago, and while waiting, the 43mm was launched. I tend to shoot around 35 the majority of the time, with occasional landscapes at wider focal lengths, and often my kids sports and with zoom lenses in the 70 to 100mm range. I was wondering whether you found the 43 more appropriate for such use cases, or the 28 may be of greater benefit as it's closer to 35. I do not do many portraits. Although being an amateur photographer, I tend to miss, in quotes, on portraits on occasion, in that I tend to occasionally shoot in such a way that the distortion is obvious. Legs, arms near the edge, architecture stretched on occasion. Is the 28 fairly forgiving with individuals such as myself?
Peter, I'm sure you're a lovely person, but if you like to shoot 35mm the majority of the time, I'm not the best person to answer this question. So, Jordan, what's your opinion on this? You love the Q3.
I love 35. And yes, if I were to have like a camera for photography, it would be I always said the Q3. So I was really looking to feel the difference. And I found the 43 a lot of the time just a little bit long for what I would expect to use that for, like quick grab shots. I did primarily just family photography with this. That's all the opportunity I had with it. But yeah, I was kind of missing the wider lens. That was my personal experience on it. And again, you've got bags of resolution, so you can step back a little, crop, and that'll minimize some of the perspective distortion that you're seeing with the 28. So if I were to, they're like, look, you get a Q3, pick your focal length. I would personally go 28 as a lover of 35.
Last one is a YouTube comment from Yanio. Basic photography question. Is there an impact of aperture on dynamic range? So if a shot is blown out by a bright sky at f2 to stopping down to f16 with shutter time change to fix the exposure, obviously, rein in the extreme dynamic range captured in the photo? I've been confused on this.
So that is a good question. No, changing the aperture is not going to affect the dynamic range. That's going to be affected by the overall total exposure. So yeah, because as you mentioned here, using the shutter speed to compensate for that change in exposure, you're not going to have a change in dynamic range. Certainly setting your aperture triangle so that, your exposure triangle so that your ISO is the lowest it can possibly be, that's going to give you more dynamic range. So shooting lower ISOs. The other thing I would consider is if you are going to shoot a wider aperture, you're going to get less depth of field. And I would say in a lot of situations, if something's blurry and out of focus in the background, it's not quite as critical if it's blown out, for example, or the opposite if it's completely black shadows. So then you're fine. But if it's in focus and that detail is important, ideally you don't want it blown out in either direction. So, but no, just the impact of the aperture itself has nothing to do with dynamic range.
All right. That's going to do it. We managed to plow through. We're only a little bit past our normal time. So we're going to move to the final thing, which is the feel-good story of the week. We've talked about this guy before, but we're going to do it again because it's neat. A new beetle species is going to be named after Joel Sartore, the photographer behind the photo arc.
It's huge.
Last month, Brett Ratcliffe, he's an emeritus professor of entomology at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, revealed that he had named a recently discovered beetle species the Bothanus sartoriae, after photographer Joel Sartore. I've always been impressed with his passion for what he's trying to do to conserve wildlife, Ratcliffe said. He's an excellent speaker. He galvanizes his audience. He's doing a great job for society and for nature and for the planet. And this is one little way I can recognize him. Sartore has currently taken more than 16,000 portraits of species living in zoos and in wildlife sanctuaries in his quest to document the world's astonishing biodiversity for his photo arc. So,
what a legend.
Good stuff.
Chris, if you could have any animal named after you, what would it be?
A squid.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, because they will rule our planet.
Are you sure it's not a fish?
What? Oh, no. I mean, because if I'm named after the new intelligent species on this planet, I mean, I think that's more
one way for you to live on. Yeah, because they'll know their own scientific names for themselves.
Exactly, right? They'll document it that, this one person that existed, our whole species named after it. So there you go.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in this week. Thanks very much. We'll catch you next week on another episode of the PetaPixel Podcast. Thanks to OM System for sponsoring the episode as usual. We'll catch you all next week. Have a good one.
Papa Chris saying bye.